Hey, and welcome to the show today. You're listening to Zensensa.com, Feel Your Heart podcast. And we have another really great show for you today. Dalila specializes in working with accomplished women who yearn for love but feel lost in romantic relationships. She helped them heal and connect to their own emotions, develop intuition, and be ready to connect on a deeper emotional level with loved ones. This podcast is made by Zensensa.com, the leading relationship institute for relationship skills and courses based on science made practical. To get the 1-hour free webinar that will give you the key skills to get a safe, intimate, and passionate relationship, just go to Zensensa.com and sign up. The link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and leave a review. It really helps me keep the positive energy going to make more podcasts. Let's head over and speak to Dalila. So I just want to welcome you on the show today. We have Dalila on the show, and we're going to be talking about self-love and also how to express our needs and desires and process anger and why that's so difficult. So I think I want to dive into it. Might be a big question, but maybe we can break it into two smaller bits, because this whole idea of self-love is quite a broad and big concept. And, I so often hear, just learn to love yourself. But I think I want to talk a bit more about how people can actually do that. Because again, if they haven't really had a model in childhood where they learned what love actually means, it can be quite difficult to even understand what it is and how we can give it to ourselves. So, yeah, I don't know if that's something you want to talk a bit about, this whole idea of self-love and what we can actually do to quite try and nurture that.
Definitely, I would love to talk about that. And you are right. We don't have so many models because our society doesn't emphasize that. We don't know how to be happy. We don't know at the end when we grow up, we don't know what we want in life because of lack of self love. And that affects us in relationships and in at work and everywhere. And soon enough we have that mid-age crisis because of that, because we kind of didn't learn who we are, how to make ourselves happy, because we always kind of chase uh, our goals, what's next and next that we need to accomplish. So I would love to talk more about that.
Perfect. So would you be able maybe to tell the listeners a bit more about what you mean when you mention self-love? Like what does that actually mean? And that might be able to give people a better grasp of what we're talking about as well.
Well, that as you said, it's big as a universe. Self-love means so many things. People often put stuff on Instagram and Facebook, painting your nails and stuff like that. And as you and I talked a little bit, we talked about commercialized everything and socializing. So we kind of almost buy that concept of what self-love is. Go to the spa, just kind of do this thing for yourself. And I'm not against it. Yes, we do need to maintain our looks and our hygiene, and it's kind of way of our expression. But I just want to remind our audience that that's just one way of self-love. And that's actually adorning your body, making your body beautiful. There's so many other ways which we don't learn so much, which is how to engage your senses, how to relish this world that's given to us. Sunlight, breeze on your skin, the smell of the ocean and forests and stuff like that. So how to enjoy your life. And that's a struggle for so many people, because we didn't learn how to enjoy. We just learned how to go to the next goal and next goal. And even when we meet that goal, there is a ravine ahead of us. Oh my God, I met this goal. There is anxiety. What's next? Instead of being able to enjoy and tell ourselves, oh my God, I did such a great job, look at that, and kind of being able to examine how awesome you are. So that's self love. Self love is also knowing that you matter and that you're worthy of love and respect, and being able to set boundaries. Surround yourself by people that are good for you. You have to remember that you don't own your allegiance to anyone if they mistreat you. But we have a lot of gaslighting, oh, your country, your family. I will be a little bit unpopular here, but sometimes our family or our neighbors don't are not our best friends necessarily. I'm not advocating for you to disown them or anything like that, but setting appropriate boundaries that protect you and your well-being might be necessary. So that's self-love. And then also listening to yourself and knowing who you are. As children, we often get internalized that notion that we are irrelevant, and that kind of carries us on into adulthood. And from that place, there is that resentment, and when we kind of want to not demand but request certain things, when it comes from that place, it it's not empowering, it's not powerful. So listening to yourself means being able to sit in your body and acknowledge your emotions, both good and bad. As I already mentioned, some good ones are uh, you know like, oh, this feels great, and you can start by small steps, from your morning coffee to tasting and smelling that aroma. So engaging all your senses and mind and integrating that instead of just multitasking. You know what I'm saying? It's like you're almost like telling your body and mind and your senses that you're just this machine for accomplishing goals. So what I encourage people is to indulge their all senses, like remember your sheets when you wake up, feel the coolness on the other side of your comforter, and then feel the warmth, and just kind of relish both of that.
And I think one thing I just want to mention as well to the listeners, because we are social beings and we learn through our social connections. There's obviously always this debate between what is genetic as well and what is nurturing. And the truth is, it's a mixture of both. And, we learn to love through our interactions with caregivers and other important people in our lives. And this is where I find the beauty of relationships too, that if we haven't been given this and don't have an understanding of what love can mean, then it's hard to love ourselves. But through relationships, both friends and partners, etc., we can learn this if we have a partner that can help, facilitate that. And yeah, it's one of the things that I guess are so nurturing around relationship when we learn how to navigate them. And I think there's two things you mentioned that I wanted to dive in a bit deeper. And one of them I really liked because I haven't really, it's very, very rare to hear people mention this when we talk about love. And that is that you mentioned part of self love is boundaries. And I think that's so true. Even though it's normally not associated with the word love, people wouldn't think about boundaries. But I think it's absolutely true. Without understanding our sense of self, and that by that I mean also our boundaries, then I think it's impossible to engage fully, because then we will also always be taken over by the other. We will always go into what I call the pleaser syndrome of trying caretake the other, and we will obviously, our needs will not be met, and eventually we'll become resentful. So it would be interesting to talk a bit more about boundaries. Would you be able to talk a bit about how people, first of all, can sense into their boundaries, and second of all, how they are then able to then could express them to their partner or their friend or whoever it might be?
Absolutely. I mean, I work with women, but as I'm talking to women, I know, and I actually work with men as well, and I notice that everybody's struggling with that, because everybody is afraid of losing that love if we set boundaries somewhere. long time ago. When you're a little baby, you created this notion in your mind that you have to kind of settle for whatever comes to you. And that's actually not true, because as you are expressing your boundaries and your expectations to your partner, you are teaching them how to love you. You are actually empowering them. You are uh, showing them that they actually matter to you. So I'm going to, for all those caretaking people who like to take care of others, I'm going to switch it. So by you taking care of yourself and expressing your boundaries, you are actually helping your partner. You're basically taking care of them, because they too want to make you happy, just like you want to make them happy. They too want to please you. This is a little pep talk for everybody who is struggling with that, just to change your mindset and start making peace uh, with your boundaries, with expressing your boundaries and that idea. And then your self worth, sense of self worth will go up as well. So, how can we feel into boundaries, you asked, right? How can we feel into them? So, as I already talked a little bit about feeling your emotions, uh, that's what it takes. That's starting uh, with mindfulness. And there, you don't even have to do some special exercises. Just as I already said, from indulging to feeling, negative emotions, just kind of feel them and name them. And you know don't jump to the conclusions right away, but just kind of process them, and how to express them to your partner or friends or anybody. You can say something, when you say such and such, you make me feel uneasy. And that's kind of the beginning of your emotional processing. You don't even know maybe how you feel, but you kind of feel icky, uneasy, and then later you can process them. You don't have to react right away. You can call them up later and say, you know what you said that day didn't sit well with me. And I don't know if you meant it or not, but it just makes me feel uneasy. It just makes me feel uh, not good. It makes me feel that I don't matter. And then the more you go into what your exact emotion is, it's going to be more powerful, and it's going to actually empower your partner or your friend to feel good about themselves. I actually matter. I What I said to this person made them feel such and such. So I actually didn't mean to make them feel like that. So they can either redeem themselves, or you will simply know who they are. Meanwhile, you didn't insult them, you didn't say anything bad about them, you didn't assume that that's their fault that you feel like that. I hope that this makes sense.
It does make so, and I'm so happy. I think it's such an important and beautiful point we're getting into here, and I love what you're saying. And I feel also, because the fact is that our body, our sensation is the first thing that register, and then our emotions, and then eventually our logic. So often, as you said, we might not be able to explain logically why it is something has violated our boundaries. And that's also why, I guess, becoming somatically aware and becoming aware of the sensation in our body when we feel violated is so important. Because that means, and I know that I do this with my partner, that if something happens and I will just describe my sensation, and I know I don't have to be able to explain to her logically why or what's causing it. I can just say there's something right now that's making me feel anxious, or I sense anxiousness or tension in my stomach. Um, and I just need a break to figure out what's going on, but it's just a bit too much. And just that is enough to I can assert my boundary in a gentle way, and then I can obviously come back later when I figured out what's going on, and I can then express that to her, right? So I want to get in. Yeah, and I wanna get into that because I know you speak about bodily sensation, and I think you and me align so much in that. I did something called the somatic method in San Francisco, a training which is very much about how to sense your body. So let's get into that in a second. I just want to emphasize a point you said to the listeners that I think is so important because and you said this, and I just want to re-emphasize it again. Boundaries is a gift that we give to our partner. Before I started dealing with relationships, I created social and emotional learning programs for children, or for parents, for focused on children. And one thing that was prominent in all the research is that children feel more safe with parents that set clear boundaries. That they actually start feeling unsafe if they don't know where boundaries are. And actually, it's the same as an adult. So if we don't set any boundaries, our partner will start feeling unsafe because, as you say, they hopefully do care about us. And I know as a man, if a woman don't set any boundaries, I will start having to tread really carefully because I constantly have to be scared about, hurting her or stepping on her boundaries. While if I can trust that she express her boundaries, then I can feel more free. And therefore, you're right. And especially, this is an important message to everyone that struggle with boundaries. But I know a lot of women have this as they learn they have to be nice and good and prioritize others. Is as a man, it's wonderful when a woman expresses her boundaries because it builds trust and it makes me feel safe. If I know that she says, actually, I'm not feeling sexual tonight, so I rather we don't do that, it makes me feel much easier for me to initiate sex because I know I will never violate her. Again, does that make sense? And therefore, I just really want to re-emphasize the point because you said this earlier that yeah, I guess you're right. We're doing a pep talk, which is that you're really helping your partner. And I know as a man, I love when my partner express her boundaries because I know I can trust her more. But to get back to the whole thing before about somatic, if people are sitting here and they think, because I was like this, how can I sense things in my body? I used to be like this. I'm like, when people say that I don't sense anything, how can they get started with this of trying to feel into their body and feel, oh, when something doesn't feel right and being able to tune into that and then express that? Is there maybe some exercise or something people can do themselves?
Mhm. Well, yes, the beginning, what I suggest is doing any kind of body scan. So you can know what the basis, what your base is. I actually have a body scan guided meditation that I can share if you like me to with the audience. And that's that beginning stage of self awareness, our body, because you're right. Many of us, I mean, including me, I'm very cognitive. I'm very much in my head, naturally, because we are running like chickens without a head to meet those goals, and we need to push our emotions and feelings, and we are just operating uh, on that level throughout the life so that we can manage this life that's given to us. And it wasn't so safe to feel your body. Some of us have bigger traumas, some of us have just emotional wounding, that makes us detached from our body to an extent. So as I already mentioned, doing this, finding some pleasure in your body is a great way to go back to it. And I said, I started talking about coffee and its flavor and smell. And I'm talking about whatever you eat, for instance. Go for a walk and don't just multitask and uh, be on your phone, but indulge your senses, observe the colors. I call it organic mindfulness. And I love doing that. Smell the earth, smell the ocean, uh, hear the birds and the wind, feel it on your skin, the sun warmth and ocean breeze. So, whatever it is that you're doing, engage all your senses, indulge in them. And when there is something negative, you can also kind of just pause and see how it feels. It's usually in your chest. in your throat and in your abdomen area that you may feel uneasy, and you can name it. And this is not right or wrong. There is no right or wrong things. This is just for you. It could be a lump, it could feel clammy. You can give it a name, and sensory kind of feel to it. It could be hard, it could be fluffy. So there's so many ways in which we can feel in our body, both in chest, belly, throat. Sometimes we can also feel weight on our shoulders. You can see if there is any images that come to you, or any sounds or words that go with that. And that's just your experience. And then that's basically your intuition in a way. Oh, I feel uneasy about it. And then you can later process it and put it into a logical uh, kind of package. And when you communicate to your partner or friends or anybody for that matter.
I love that point, and I think, I guess, so often we distract ourselves with our phone or the TV, also because we feel, I guess, what could come across as uncomfortable sensations when we actually do that stillness. And I think when you said, there's something really beautiful in not categorizing it as good or bad, and also realizing that sensations and emotions are temporarily, they come and they go. And I guess there's some relief in that when we start this practice, because I know in the beginning myself, because I had some physical trauma, I found it really difficult to stay present. I tried, and then I had to distract myself, and I know I'm not alone with this. I probably share this with billions of people on this planet. And it took a lot of practice, and also just the knowledge that it's temporary, whatever discomfort sensation that came up, and I felt all this tension in my stomach would not remain. And knowing that allowed me to then sink in and just be present, and not have to say, oh, this is bad, and try and distract it, and slowly then be able, I guess it's like any other skill, right? It's like learning to play a sport. The more we practice it, the better we become at it. And when we can then sense that, we are suddenly able to express ourselves to our partner so much more clearly, because how are they supposed to understand us if we don't even understand ourselves? So I guess all good relationship skills kind of start with self-reflection and self-awareness, right?
Absolutely.
And
And
it,
I just wanted to add one more point. As I already mentioned, your body is not just a source of trauma. As you said, it's temporary, that feeling. Just naming it and just being curious. Oh, okay, I feel weird in my belly. What is it? Oh, okay. And remembering that your body is also your resource. You can also find positive, good sensations in it, just to remind you. So trying to practice this will give you both awareness of your emotions and heightened intuition, as well as resources. Because this wonderful body, which we tend to blame, hate, look at it and criticize, uh, carried us through all that life, all that experience. It's been with us. It gave us pleasure, and it suffered, all the abuse that happened. So if we can be a little bit more compassionate towards our body and recognize it, that's another good suggestion to be more in touch with your body.
yeah, and I guess there's something really beautiful in that process of also that I think we're able to rewire it. I know that I used to hate gentle touch, and I noticed with women that I also worked with in the past that, especially with sexual or other kind of physical traumas, some of them tend to actually not like gentle touch. And I know I was similar. And again, through the rewiring and engaging and being present with the sensation, and of course, in a safe environment with somebody you trust, or a practitioner, maybe a somatic practitioner, start again learning touch. We can actually rewire the body. And I know now that, touch is my love language, and I love to get gentle stroking. And my whole body basically changed that response just through that awareness and being present with that and doing that work. Um, and again, it also helps very much with boundaries, which I guess is where we came from. And it also brings us on to where I kind of want to continue with this, which is, expressing our needs. Because my first question is, why is it so difficult in the first place for people to express their needs?
Oh boy, yes. You know why? Because there's this gaslighting that we are needy. Starting from family, you learn somewhere. Even if your parents love you, maybe they're overwhelmed, and maybe there is war in your country, and your parents just don't have energy to pay attention to your little but very important need for that little baby at every step. Somehow you internalize that your needs don't matter. And then when you grow up and seek relationships, you feel those needs somewhere, but you cannot be in touch with them because you feel shame about them. And the our Western culture often emphasizes, oh, you shouldn't be needy, you shouldn't be clingy. When in fact, if you recognize your needs, uh, then you will realize, no, I'm not clingy. I'm a human being. It means I'm a mammal, and mammals are wired to have human connections and other needs, of course. We have needs, and these are my needs and wants. And I'm sure, there will be a partner that will be stoked to be with the exact kind of person that I am. So that's one of the reasons. And then we continue, beating ourselves up. I mean, I hear so many people on social media, I'm clingy. I have, there is a anxious attachment disorder, not disorder, style. And if you just learn to communicate those needs to your partner uh, instead of just hoping that he will become your parent, like and provide you with that missing experience, uh, that would be so much easy. I tell my clients, your partner can't read your mind. Men are not mind readers, but same for women in this case. So if you just express what you need and you can put it in the words, that you are comfortable with, you can say, in one way, as we talk, it's about boundaries. You have a partner who has avoidant attachment style, and as soon as you two start growing closer, he may kind of start withdrawing. And then you can say, I noticed as we started, as our relationship started growing, that at least that's what I felt, that you started withdrawing. And I just want to let you know I don't do that kind of dance. I don't like that relationship dance, and I don't engage, let me know if you're interested in a real deep connection or not, so there are different ways in which you can express those needs, and that will depend on how close your relationship is and with that person, uh, like that. But what matters is that you don't blame that person, that you don't say, oh, you are like this or you are like that, because that kind of makes them just go further into their shell, and feeling that maybe they can't meet your needs. I hope that this makes sense.
Oh, it makes so much sense. And I think it's some really, again, some beautiful, beautiful points that you're bringing up. And I think also, as you mentioned, I think we do live in a culture that's excessively focused on glorifying individualism. and this idea that it's all about standing on our own two legs, and simply forgot the fact that we know in neuroscience we are social beings. And you're right, I hear this so often, this talk about needy, and instead of categorizing it, you're right, they're all valid needs. And yes, some people obviously have more need for reassurance. People with more anxious attachment style often need more reassurance, but it's still just that, it's a need, and we don't have to categorize it and try and shame it. And actually, there's a beautiful opportunity in relationships when we stop shaming and accepting that we can actually heal each other and also make each other more securely attached, which both parties will benefit from. And I can even see these dynamics in my partnership, and luckily we have a lot of awareness around this, but where I can then tune in and something happened, where suddenly her ex-partner came over to her house and I hadn't been informed about it. They hadn't been in touch, and I know he doesn't really want me in her life. And I just got a text, and I said to her, I sensed into my body, and I said to her, I feel a bit anxious about this, and I don't want to obviously limit you seeing your ex, but the way it was communicated with no us not talking about it and just getting a text message, saying he's coming, is that fine? That really made me feel not safe. And I was then able to express that to her, that need, that I had that need for safety, and it made me feel anxious. And then we had a talk, and then, we called up and she clarified and she said, oh, he's just very good with my child, and he's just coming to visit and he's not staying over. And then my system calmed down, and then everything was fine, and it ended up becoming a very connecting conversation. But again, that came from not categorizing each other, or she would never lash out and say, oh, you're being needy. Instead, she just listened to me expressing my need and say, this is what I need to feel safe. I need to understand what's going on in a bit more than a text. And she then gave me that need, and then actually we ended up feeling more connected, and we created, I think, a more safe relationship bubble. So there's some beauty in how we can heal each other when we take away all this categorization. And also, I find so much freedom in accepting the fact that, what, it's okay to need others. I also grew up with this, that I had to be independent, and it made me live 30 years of my life feeling so disconnected from people around me, what you would describe as, avoidant attachment. And I realized that it was just what I have learned and all I knew. And especially for a lot of men, and I'm not saying it's only men that are avoidant, certainly women can be that too, but a lot of men are avoidant. And again, these attachment styles can change when we allow them to be healed within relationships. So anyway, I just wanted to quickly put that out there. And I think this kind of takes us down the path of talking a bit more, I guess, about needs, about how people can get more in touch with what their actual needs are, whether it's emotionally, physically, sexually. How can people kind of start becoming more aware? Because I guess a lot of people don't even know what their needs are, right? Because you're right, they never really learn to tune into it. So how can they do that? And two, how can they express it in a way where their partner might actually be able to hear them?
Right. So, well, as I already described, listening to your body, senses, emotions will help you become in touch with your anger, because due to these unmet needs and emotional wounding, there is a anger that covers our more vulnerable emotions and those needs. And there is that grief and sadness that we lost a part of our life experience, that we missed out due to these wounds. So once you get in touch with that grief, healing can occur. But also, as you said, one, uh, once you express that to your partner and then you get positive outcome from it, that's so healing. And uh, then you stop that gaslighting to yourself, saying, oh, I'm needy, so that's very powerful. uh, so you see, nobody thinks like, I'm not worthy consciously. L'Oreal commercials tell you that you're worth it, right? I don't know if that's still running on TV, but back 10 years ago or so, because you're worth it. And we all kind of hear these messages from social media, but deep down, we don't feel it. And that's why we are ashamed and embarrassed to express our needs. So getting in touch with your anger and realizing, when your partner uh, doesn't do something, or she didn't communicate to you the way you feel safe, uh, you can process that anger further by going deeper into your emotions and saying, wondering what you're angry about. Is it that your partner is meeting her ex, or that she didn't communicate, or that you don't feel safe? And it's beautiful how you expressed it, Thomas, because it's not about her, co-parenting, what I hear, right, with her ex partner, but it's about how she communicated and you felt unsafe. It's about your feelings. It's not so much about her actions. And we all need different levels. So focusing on yourself more rather than your partner's shortcomings and putting that on them, that will help you significantly feel empowered about your emotions, and then communicate to them in more empowering way, as I said, so that they don't feel attacked, but instead they will feel, oh, look, he cares about me, he cares about me to communicate this with me, and he's being vulnerable with me. And as a reward, you're going to get your partner to also open up more to you. I hope that this makes sense.
Oh, it does, and you're absolutely right. And again, I want to re-emphasize what you're saying here because it's important. Is that because my question was obviously how can people express their needs so they get heard, and your answer is so spot on, which is essentially that we focus on ourselves and our experience and our sensation and emotion rather than blaming them for what they done. Because you're right, in that example I gave, my partner have done nothing wrong, and she just communicated in a way that felt natural to her in the moment, and there's nothing wrong with that. So instead of attacking her, you're absolutely right. What I did is instead describe that it just made me feel anxious, and I then expressed what my need was, which was that we could speak on the phone. So I could just understand, whether he was sleeping over, not sleeping over, etc. And again, so I think you're right. So it's about taking away the blame, and when the audience out there go practice this, remember to not make it about saying to your partner you did X, Y, and Z wrong, or you do no, or you don't do X, Y, and Z, but instead focus on how you're feeling in that experience, and what you particular need then to try and give you what it is that you want, etc. So thank you for for making that clear.
And it's going to be difficult at the beginning because we are used to all the other ways of communicating, but not this one. So take your time. You don't have to, react right away. Take your time. What matters too is that you don't uh, do behaviors that will kind of damage your relationship with your partner. Don't slam the door, don't just kind of react in a angry way towards them at the moment. Take your time, but remind them that you are still partners, that you're taking your time to figure things out, and you're going to be back by 6 p.m. or whatever that time is, so that there is no damage. And at the same time, your partner will get a chance to pickle in whatever that is that they did, and how that affected them, so that you can come with a solid way of communicating, back when you're back with your partner.
Yeah, I like that when you said also if you go, say I'll be back or we'll talk about this later. You said I'll be back at 6 o'clock, which for me is always maintaining the safety of a relationship. I always say to people, never threaten the safety of the relationship because that's when everything start going wrong and become interpreted through a negative bias. So always ensure that you make it clear that the relationship is safe, even if you're upset, because it's fine to be upset. It's natural. We will all be that in relationships, but that should never threaten the foundation. And as long as, yeah, but I think as long as we navigate it in that way, we can deal with challenges, right? Which we all have. Like you said, I'm not perfect either. I mess up, but it's always about making sure. And I guess in your example, that's exactly what you did. By saying I'll be back at 6 p.m., we create safety, right? We say we're safe and we'll come back to you. I'm not abandoning you, but I'm still bloody upset, so I'm gonna leave and calm myself down. Yeah, I just and also you spoke earlier about anger. I really like that you dived into that a lot and start talking about how anger and the fact that we felt we missed out on all these experiences and that resentment, because I feel, and this is probably more relevant to women than to men, but the majority of my listeners are women, so this would be good to discuss. I feel that women often grow up, and especially in our culture again, where anger is not permitted. So it's really difficult for a lot of women, right, to tap into their anger and even allowing themselves to feel it. And again, is there a way that they can easily or slowly or gently guide themselves into being allowed to feel this anger?
Well, just remembering that anger is natural emotion. Again, this is a pep talk. It tells you that something is not right for you, and that you have a right to uh, experience your feelings. And usually, under that anger, there is beneath that anger, there's some more vulnerable emotions which are way more important. And I want to encourage you to kind of process that anger, and before you express them to your before you communicate to your partner, so you're clear, uh, because anger can take us out of our body, out of our, we call it, window of tolerance. So there are some people who, as you mentioned, anger is not acceptable for women. So some women are completely like disown that emotions, while other then go in this other, extreme, in which they uh, explode or say something that they didn't mean, or completely disown the relationship. uh, so instead of going out of that window of tolerance, which we talk about in trauma, when we are not online, when our body, mind, and emotions are not connected, integrated, I suggest kind of taking your time and processing it before you communicate to your partner. And you can say, hey, I feel angry about this. And again, depending on what level of relationship you have with your partner or friend or whomever in your life, and what level of boundaries, you can express deeper, more vulnerable emotions beneath that anger, to kind of build even stronger connection with your partner, as you mentioned. Or you can just say, you know what, cut it out. That's just not acceptable, you know. And that anger actually empowers you in that way, when you say that, and and gives boundary to your partner, and it shows them that you're a solid person that's not gonna tolerate BS. Uh, and when you express deeper, more vulnerable emotions after you process your anger, then you allow your partner to feel, more connected, and open up even more to you. But as you said, men feel safer when you can express yourself and your boundaries, and being in touch with that anger will allow you to express those boundaries and be firm. And when you say no, that means no. When you say yes, that means yes. And when you don't do it, when everything kind of goes, when you tolerate his bad behaviors, then men don't feel safe in it. Then it makes them wonder, what are you in there for? Do you respect yourself? um, are you there just for my money, or because you can't find anybody else? Like, can I treat you this badly? I hope that this answers.
Yeah, and I really feel again more lots of gold in here in what you just said, because you're right, emotions are just that, messengers. They're not good or bad, and I think as soon as we can realize that, we don't have to categorize them and only allow ourselves to feel, some of them. And you also said, it's good to go away and process anger before expressing. And I think, again, that's spot on, because often you're right, there are secondary emotions beneath that. And also, when we are caught up in anger, we are often not able to express ourselves in a constructive way because we're in the stress response. So these are all super good, I think, and valid points. And I think I just want to get on to, because we were talking about needs and then expressing those needs. And when people often, have gone through some of this progress, they have become more self aware, they can express their boundaries, but also their needs, then we obviously are always going to come to a point where at some point we will feel some level of disappointment because even if we have the most wonderful partner in the whole universe, nobody can fulfill all our needs, right? And as much as it's a nice, dream from Hollywood movies, the truth is that it's just not possible. Nobody can fulfill all our needs. And one single person is not meant to do that. We used to live in tribal communities where there were a whole tribe that fulfilled our different needs. So, how can people then deal with some of that disappointment that eventually will come up when they get really clear on their needs?
Well, it depends on the needs, but if you're with the right partner, if if we determine that, let's say you're not in a relationship where you want children and he doesn't, and then that need just isn't going to be met. If you're talking about these uh, needs that are not met uh, from your parents, and now you are meeting them, need for more closeness. uh, Once you kind of get a sense of your partner, and once you communicate, once you accept your own emotions, uh, you become it's funny, you become more self-reliant. You don't feel so needy, for the lack of better term, as much as I hate that term. Because ultimately you're not angry because our needs are not met. We know that our needs cannot always be met at all times. You're not angry when your partner, for instance, needs some me time. You're angry because of that gaslighting and that society and family and yourself telling you that you're too needy. So once you make the peace with yourself and your needs, it's going to be much easier. You're going to be able to uh, understand your partner and his love, because not everybody loves the same. I don't love you the same way you love me. You love me the way you love, the way you are. And men love differently from women. So then we accept those differences, and we can kind of uh, look for positives, just like as I talked about enjoying and indulging into it. Sometimes we all are stuck on this poet guy, from 5 centuries ago, who wrote this beautiful poetry and these wonderful words, but we forget about our partner who is maybe an accountant, IT guy who slaves uh, throughout the day and life, so that he can help us he can contribute and afford the lifestyle that we have. So we have to kind of appreciate our partner for who he is. And because we are in this not just to have our needs met, but also to honor and understand that our person, because ultimately the biggest joy is to love, not to get love necessarily. But in order to be able to experience that joy of giving love, you need to feel safe with that partner. You're ultimately looking for a partner that you can feel safe to love selflessly. And then when your needs are not occasionally met, it's not going to be so hurtful like when you are not in touch with your needs. I hope that this was a little bit roundabout, but I hope that this makes sense again.
Oh, it's so beautiful. I love it. The safety love selflessly. I think that's so beautiful. I think that's a wonderful way to kind of end the podcast and leave people with that. And I also think in that disappointment, there's also some beauty in just being present. Again, we talked a lot about presence, and just being present with the disappointment and listen to your partner and acknowledge that disappointment without having to fix it. I know, especially for men, we always feel we have to fix things, but actually we don't always have to fix it. Sometimes we can turn disappointment into a really connecting experience purely from listening to our partner and acknowledge their experience and disappointment and be present with them and saying, I'm here with you in this disappointment and we can process it together. I might not be able to give you X, Y, and Z, but I can certainly be here and support you and listen to how disappointing that is for you. And I think in that, I've seen often that couples are able to turn around what disappointment and distance into actual connection. But I really love the saying that you said. I want to end it with that, which is, in create the safety of selfless loving, where we have that gift of being able to love someone fully and feel safe in that, because that is a beautiful, beautiful space. And I really want to thank you so much, Dalila, for coming on the podcast and sharing your knowledge, your experience, and your wisdom. And there's so much more I want to ask you, but I feel maybe we can do another podcast later, because otherwise this will go on and on and on.
Yeah, I would just love to say, to add something that you said about being heard, instead of fixing things, because it's kind of about you, instead of your partner. Because our ultimate wounding is not being seen, not being understood. And that's the biggest gift that you can give to your partner when they experience any kind of need. Okay, maybe I can't fix it, but I can feel how you feel. And that's very much bonding moment.
Yeah, that is the pinnacle of intimacy, isn't it? I could not agree more, because that is all we ever want, first from our parents and eventually from our adult partnership. You're right.
Yeah.
We want to be seen and accepted. That's what we really, truly, deeply desire. And you're right. That is the biggest gift. There's no fixing that can ever beat that. And that's where the beauty of intimacy really lies, and where love can flourish. So thank you so much for adding that. And as I said, thank you so much for your time today on the podcast as well. I hope you enjoyed the show today. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and come back for our new weekly podcast. Also, leave a review to keep the positive energy going. That really keeps me motivated to make more of these podcasts. If you want to learn the key skills to a safe, intimate, and passionate relationship, then head over to Zensensa.com and join the free 1-hour webinar. The link is in the description. You'll learn the 4 reasons that relationships break down, how your attachment style may fuel conflict with your partner, and how to break that cycle, why people cheat and the 1 tip that can prevent it, the simple 3-step formula to lasting love. So thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you next week for another podcast.